Welcome to this Access Anatomy screencast from the University of Leeds that's going to outline the general features of the stomach and duodenum. So first of all, let's start by drawing out the esophagus, which passes through the thorax and then enters into the abdomen by passing through the diaphragm at the level of the 10th thoracic vertebra. The esophagus is then continuous with the stomach, which we can draw out here, which assumes this rough J-shape pattern, and we can see the stomach. We can split the stomach into numerous regions. So we have the cardia here, and this is where the esophagus just enters into the stomach. We have the cardia. Then above the esophagogastric junction, we have this little superior outpoaching, and that is known as the fundus. We then have a long body, and this eventually tapers down. It narrows into a region known as your pylorus. And the pylorus has a pyloric antrum, which we can see here. So here we have a pyloric antrum, and then we have the pyloric canal. The pyloric canal distally forms the thickened pyloric sphincter, and this helps to regulate the passage of chyme from the stomach into the duodenum. So when the pressure of the chyme within the stomach, as the stomach is mechanically churning the ingested food, overcomes the resistance of the pyloric sphincter, then the chyme can pass into the duodenum. We'll come to the duodenum later on. We can also add a couple of additional features. We have running along the left border of the stomach, we have the greater curvature. So here we have the greater curvature. And running along the right border of the heart, we have the lesser curvature. So here we can see the lesser curvature here. So the greater curvature and the lesser curvature. We can also add in this little indentation here, which is known as the cardial notch, and we can also add in a shallower notch here, and this is known as the angular incisure. So here we have the greater curvature and the lesser curvature. We can see the esophagus passes into the stomach, and here we have the cardia. Here we have the fundus that passes above the esophagogastric junction. We have the slender. We have the body. We then have it tapering into the pylorus, where we can have a pyloric antrum, and we can have a pyloric canal. If we then turn to the duodenum is a C-shaped tube, and it is the beginning of the small intestine. So here we can see the duodenum, and we can see that it's actually continuous with the jejunum. The duodenum being the first of three parts that makes up the small intestine, and here we have the C-shaped duodenum. Here, where the duodenum is then continuous with the jejunum, so here we can have the jejunum, we have the duodenojejunal flexure. So here we can see the duodenojejunal flexure. If we look at the duodenum in a bit more detail, then we can see there's four parts to the duodenum, numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. We can also call these the superior, the descending, horizontal, and ascending part of the duodenum. Sitting in the concavity of this C-shaped duodenum is going to be the head of the pancreas, but I won't draw that in here. An important landmark which we can see on the internal surface of the descending part of the duodenum is the major duodenal papilla. This little elevation, which we can observe on the internal surface of the duodenum, allows both bile and pancreatic juices to enter into the duodenum. It's also important as it demarcates two regions of the gastrointestinal tract. It demarcates the foregut from the midgut. Remember, the gastrointestinal tract can be divided into the foregut, the midgut, and the hindgut. And at the level of the major duodenal papilla, which is here, this demarcates the foregut above, therefore including the first part of the duodenum and half the second part of the duodenum, and the stomach from the midgut, which includes the remaining portions of the duodenum, so the distal half of the second part, the third horizontal part, the fourth ascending part of the duodenum, and the jejunum and the ileum. And we'll look at the boundary between the midgut and the hindgut later on. So now let's look at some important peritoneal ligaments that are associated with the stomach and the initial portion of the duodenum. Remember, the majority of the duodenum is retroperitoneal, specifically secondarily retroperitoneal, but the first portion of the superior part of the duodenum is attached to the liver via the lesser omentum, and it also has coming away from it the greater omentum. So let's draw these two omenta in. So here we can see coming away from the greater curvature, from here and also from here, we have the greater omentum. We can just draw it out with these green dotted lines. So here we have the greater omentum coming away from the greater curvature of the stomach and also from the initial part of the superior piece of the duodenum. We have the greater omentum, this double-layered peritoneal fold that is going to pass anterior to the small intestines. We can split this greater omentum into 3 peritoneal ligaments, and these are based on what specific organ the greater omentum goes to attach to. So if we look superiorly, we can see there's a portion of the greater omentum that goes towards the diaphragm, and this part of the greater omentum is known as the gastrocolic ligament. We also have a portion that goes towards the spleen, and this is known as the gastrosplenic ligament. And the majority of the greater omentum, or at least the remaining portion of the greater omentum, passes towards the transverse colon, and we call this portion the gastrocolic ligament. So within the greater omentum there are 3 specific peritoneal ligaments. One goes to the diaphragm, gastrophrenic, one goes to the spleen, gastrosplenic, and one goes to the transverse colon, which is the gastrocolic. If we've got a greater omentum associated with greater curvature, we're also going to have a lesser omentum associated with the lesser curvature. And the lesser omentum is passing towards the liver. So here we can see the lesser omentum is passing towards the liver. Specifically, we have a part of the lesser omentum that goes from the liver to the stomach. So from the liver to the stomach, we have the liver to stomach, we have the hepatogastric ligament, and we also have a part that goes from the liver to the duodenum, the initial first part of the superior aspect of the duodenum, and that is the hepatoduodenal ligament. The hepatoduodenal ligament and the hepatogastric ligament form the lesser omentum. So hopefully in the future you'll be able to appreciate that this hepatoduodenal ligament that's passing from the liver to the first part of the duodenum is thickened, and it contains 3 important structures known as the portal triad. It contains the hepatic artery, the bile duct, and the hepatic portal vein. And these are within the free edge, this free edge here, of the lesser omentum, specifically the hepatoduodenal ligament.